Alright guys, today we're talking about Momstat. People already know her as one of the better supports in Genshin Impact, but she's also a very strong DPS if you invest into her right. She's really flexible and can fit into almost any team. So today we're going to be talking about how you can get the most damage with her in a DPS position, and soon after I'll have builds up for support and burst DPS. All of the info in this video is being cross-referenced with the Jean mains network, so you know it's going to be the best build possible for DPS Jean. Without further procrastination, let's get right into the builds. So taking a look at physical damage Jean first, to get the most possible physical damage, you're actually going to want to run 2 Bloodstained Chivalry and 2 Pale Flame. Both of these 2-piece sets are going to give you 25% physical damage bonus, which is going to be really huge to your physical damage output. And the nice thing is there's no activation cost. You don't have to use your E or Q or anything. You're just going to get that damage bonus. But if you don't have 2 and 2, you'll want to replace one of the 2 sets with 2 gladiators, and that's going to help your damage out a lot as well. 2 gladiators is going to give you an 18% attack bonus, which is not as much as the 25% physical damage bonus that we're going for, but it affects your whole kit and not just your physical damage, so that's really nice. This was originally the best physical damage build, but when Pale Flame came out, it became easier to build physical by using 2 and 2 of those. You'll still get good damage though. Just don't use 4-piece gladiator because you don't get any charged attack bonus damage. A big thing with physical damage Jean is that you're going to be using your charged attack a lot, and so you don't want to lose out on that extra damage when you're using gladiator. Some people by now are probably wondering about 4-piece Pale Flame, and it's viable, but it's not necessarily optimal. So as I mentioned earlier, you want to charged attack spam whenever you're fighting enemies. That's the most optimal way to do physical damage with Jean because her charged attack multiplier is really strong. But when you're against smaller enemies, unless you're against a wall, whenever you E, you're going to hit them away from you, and that'll mean you have to sprint to catch them if you want to make sure you can keep stun locking them. Essentially, in most cases, you're going to run out of stamina if you're using 4-piece Pale Flame. So honestly, I just wouldn't go for it. That doesn't mean it's like a bad set, but I think it's much more efficient to just use 2 Bloodstained, 2 Pale Flame because there's no activation cost and the damage is pretty similar. As a side note, it also stops you from yeeting enemies as fast if you're not on PC. If you're on PC, it won't be a problem because you can just flick your mouse, but if you're on mobile, that's going to be real tough. As for main stats on your artifacts, here's what you want. You're going to want attack percent sands, physical damage on the goblet, and you're going to want to use crit damage or crit rate on the hat, whichever one is going to get you a better ratio of crit rate to crit damage. For the ratio, you're looking for a 40 to 80 ratio or a 1 to 2, but 40 to 80 is the minimum. If you can't get that, just run attack instead. And for substats, your priority should be crit rate, crit damage, and attack. Those are going to be the biggest ones for you. Energy recharge is pretty nice though. It allows you to be much more flexible. Moving on now to mixed DPS Jean though, we're going to be talking about how to get good animo damage and physical damage. So the set that I would recommend is 2-piece Viridescent and 2-piece Gladiator, and the reason for that is you get the 15% animo damage bonus from Viridescent Finner, and you get the 2-piece Gladiator set bonus, which is 18% attack. I personally really like using this build with a physical damage weapon, just so that way I'm able to get tons of physical damage out while still maintaining my Galeblade damage. Galeblade has some pretty ridiculous multipliers for an E skill on 6-second cooldown, so if you run a physical damage weapon, you can run an animo damage goblet, which is going to bring you a ton of gains. In fact, I would definitely recommend this mixed DPS build if you're going to go for mixed DPS, only if you're using a physical damage weapon. If you don't have a physical damage weapon, I would actually go with the 2-piece Viridescent and 2-piece Bloodstain or 2-piece Pale Flame, because a 25% physical damage bonus is going to get you more damage than the 18% attack bonus. I would go for this set over the 2-piece Viridescent 2-piece Gladiator, only if you're using an attack percent weapon. For main stats on the artifacts, you're going to be looking for attack percent sands always, and then your goblet can either be attack, physical damage, or animo damage. The best one of those is going to depend on which set you're using. If you're using 2-piece Viridescent, 2-piece Gladiator, and you're using a physical damage weapon, I recommend animo damage on the cup. That's how I like to play the game. It's totally fair if you want to use a physical damage cup. The one time I would not recommend physical damage is if you're using a phys damage weapon and you're using Bloodstain. At that point, you might as well take off the Viridescent and just put on the other 25% physical damage bonus set, because then you basically have a physical damage build. And then of course for the hat, you want crit rate, crit damage. You want the 40 to 80, 1 to 2 ratio. If you had to ask me which of the sets I think is better, I would say mixed DPS is only better if you're using a Kill of Favonia. I personally don't think it's better in any other situation than just going all out on one build or the other. And if you're using her as a main DPS, building her physical damage is probably going to be your best bet. She'll still get decent damage on her Galeblade and her Dandelion Breeze, mostly just because her multipliers are ridiculous. Moving on now from the 2 DPS builds that we just mentioned, we're going to look at weapons and which ones are best for each build. We're going to actually go in order listing all the weapons that we think are relevant to these builds, including free-to-play ones from best to worst. First off, no debate, Jade Cutter is the best. It has a 44% crit rate at level 90, and the passive gives a ton of attack based on your HP. It's low-key kind of broken. Following that, Kill of Favonia is pretty bussin'. It has high base attack and physical damage bonus. Aesthetically, it was literally made for Jean and fashion over meta, so even if I had Jade Cutter, I'd definitely use a Kill of Favonia over it just because, you know, it looks pretty damn good. Summit Shaper is the next best one if you're running a strong shield comp. It's specifically really good if you can get all of its stacks up, then it can compete with the Kill of Livonia and sometimes even pull ahead. After Summit Shaper is Skyward Blade, and if you actually look at the spreadsheets we'll show at the end, Skyward Blade without its passive actually isn't that good, but with its passive it's really strong, and because it's easy to use Elemental Burst when you have an energy recharge weapon, you'll have its uptime pretty high. The Black Sword is next, and the main reason for that is it's a crit weapon, but it also increases your normal and charged attack damage, and it does a burst heal, which honestly isn't that necessary for Jean, but every little bit counts. Following the Black Sword is your first free-to-play accessible weapon, Prototype Rancor. It's craftable, so if you sell your soul to this mobile game company, you'll probably be able to refine it, and honestly, it's pretty dang competitive with a lot of other weapons when it's at max stacks. Next up for free-to-play, if you don't have Rancor, you can use R5 Harbinger of Dawn. I specify R5 because that's specifically when it gets stronger than a lot of the other alternatives. And the nice thing about Harbinger of Dawn is it is actually literally easy to refine. You don't have to be that lucky. You just have to be able to keep its passive up, which is actually not too bad on Jean, especially if you run a shield, you'll be able to sit above 90% health easy. R5 Harbinger of Dawn with its passive up actually beats out the Flute, but the Flute will do more passive healing. And finally, Black Cliff is pretty close to the Flute at 0 stacks, and if you're coping, you can use Lion's Roar. Here's the data that my math person worked out with Jean mains. A plus sign means its passive is on, and the number refers to how many stacks it has on its passive. And for the mixed DPS build, as you can see, the weapons are a little bit different. One of the main things you'll notice is that Black Cliff does a little bit better, and that Rancor does a lot worse. Now take these with a grain of salt. Everyone's substats are going to be different, but this is generally a good look at what's going to do the most overall kit damage with a mixed build. And that's about it for the build portion of this video, but we're going to talk about techs and things, and these are really cool with Jean, so I suggest stick around. The first tech I want to talk about is the fall damage tech, and this one's actually really important to everyone, no matter what your build is. If you've ever fallen off a cliff in Genshin, you know about fall damage, and enemies can actually take that too. So with Gale Blade, you can lift enemies and hit them into the air, so when they land, they take a big chunk of damage. The nice thing about fall damage is it's HP percentage based, so basically no matter how much health the enemy has, they're actually going to take a portion of damage that correlates with their momentum coming down and not the amount of damage that you're built for. Literally, in theory, you could use 4 1-star artifacts and a level 1 weapon, and you'd still be able to do the same amount of fall damage to enemies. You can also do double fall damage on most enemies by using a charge attack to lift them up, and then if you angle yourself downwards and use her elemental skill, it's going to bring enemies downward and it's going to make them hit the ground. So you just hold it, enemy comes down, takes fall damage, then you aim them up at the sky again, shoot them, and that's going to make them take a second round of fall damage. So it's really good for high level Spiral Abyss, and it's really good for the Star Wars cosplay you've been working on. The one thing that you need to know about is that you can only lift enemies off the ground who are within 20 levels of you, so you have to make sure that if you're doing endgame content like Spiral Abyss, that you're within 20 levels of the enemies you're trying to pick up. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Sucrose allowing you to do extra fall damage, and this is just one of those things that has to do with momentum, which we were just talking about. If you use Sucrose's E at the right time when an enemy's falling, it actually sucks them down into the center, and that makes them take extra fall damage, which is really strong. Jean actually has a lot of synergies when it comes to fall damage, but Sucrose is one of the best ones just because it's so easy to use. As for team comp tips, Jean is super flexible, and she can fit into any composition, but if you're building her as a physical DPS, you'll want to make sure that you're running off-field supports for Cryo and Electro, so that way you can get Superconduct and make your physical hits stronger. So I actually recommend Diona, Kaya, Fischl, and Beidou as options for this. Fischl and Kaya are 2 of my favorites to use, but I've been using Diona a lot more lately just as a shield substitute. Beidou's also really great just because whenever you use your normal attack into charge attack, it's going to do Electro damage. And of course, if you're free to play and don't have any gacha Electro units, you can actually just use Lisa because Lisa lowers enemies' defense and she's able to apply that Superconduct. If you're using Jean, you can actually use her Gale Blade to hold enemies inside of Lisa's field, and that's really powerful. But those are just some general tips for Jean gameplay. If you want to see more techs, you can actually go check out my 5 Jean techs video. That will be in the description and in the pinned comment. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to go ahead and leave a like down below, and if you like my content, make sure to subscribe to see more. On this channel, we do lots of guides and discussions, and we also do a similar thing over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Braxophone if you want to catch me live. We have lots of awesome Genshin content. Oh, and let me know if you're getting the Jean skin down in the comments. See you guys later.